NWP Radio.
You're listening to NWP Radio, a production of the National Writing Project.
NWP. NWP Radio.
Hello, friends. I'm Brian Ripley Crandall, director of the Connecticut Writing Project at Fairfield University, and I'm delighted once again to co-host an episode of The Right Time with National Writing Project's executive director, Tanya Baker. Tonight's show has a little history to it, but also a lot of love and family as always. I know many of you are fully entrenched right now in football season, but others are knee-deep in college volleyball like me, or even professional baseball. But many of us are anticipating the best season of them all, basketball season, and it will soon be upon us. We also know that many of our listeners love the We Need Diverse Text series and are very aware of the incredible reach that graphic novels have on our readers. We hit the lottery with tonight's show, and I'm happy to say we're going to make it happen. Tonight with us are two stellar human beings. Wait. We have three stellar human beings with us tonight, and me, the gigantic nerd. Tanya's also in the house. And I'm wondering, how are you doing, Tanya? Are you glad to be here?
Hi, Brian. Well, as you know, the world is a complicated place out there right now, but that's why I love spending my time with you working on The Right Time. I love that we celebrate great teachers and the great writers whose work those teachers share with their students. We're beyond delighted to have an award-winning children's book author, Hena Khan, with us tonight. I know that you used her book, We Are Big Time, in a collaboration with the Fairfield University women's basketball team last year as part of the MLK Youth Leadership Academy. I also am so excited to meet our teacher tonight because you told me you were picking the perfect interviewer for tonight's show. And so we're equally delighted to have teacher leader, woman warrior, and athlete Rihannon Adsit in the studio as well. This will be a memorable conversation, I'm sure. Hena and Rihannon, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
It's going to be so much
Happy
fun.
to be a part of this.
Hena Khan has been publishing books for children, including many that center Pakistani American and Muslim characters for over 2 decades. She writes award-winning books in a multitude of formats, including picture books, middle grade fiction, pick your path adventures, which I love, and graphic novels. Her stories are often centered around the culture, community, friendship, and family, and draw from her own experiences, which we encourage with our own writers. Hena's best-selling novels include Amina's Voice and More to the Story. She's also the author of Zayd, Saleem, Chasing the Dream, Zara's Rules, and Super You series. Hena's acclaimed picture books included Golden Domes and Silver Lanterns, Under My Hijab, I always say that wrong, hijab, and It's Ramadan, Curious George. Her most recent books include Bhangra, Boogie, and Dark Nights and Light Hearts. Man, prolific. She holds an MA in International Affairs from the George Washington University, and I'm holding up the book that I just love teaching this year. Yeah.
Thank you.
And it's my pleasure to introduce Rihannon. Rihannon Adsit runs, bikes, swims, and writes whenever and wherever she can, gets unreasonably excited about beautiful trees, and has yet to meet a dog she didn't love. Born and raised in North Syracuse, Rihannon graduated from Lemoyne College before earning her master's for secondary English education at Syracuse University. She taught at Liverpool High School for many years before moving to Lake Placid, where she currently teaches English and creative writing. She's a magazine editor and is often exploring mountains with her husband, Eric. Welcome, Rihannon.
That's awesome. So, Rihanna, we're going to ask you to give us a writing prompt that teachers might want to stop and use with their kids, or writers at home might just want to explore this question as well. It's a good one, so I'm going to hand it back to you, or over to you.
Sure. Hi, everyone. So, there is beauty in a simple motto. And I remember when Ted Lasso first came to the scene in 2020, the term believe just showed up everywhere. I'm in my classroom right now, actually, and we have the believe signs all over the school. So I suspect that more than the score will become the motto of more than a few teams around the country as readers get their hands on We Are Big Time. So my question for you is, what does more than the score mean to you? And how might you apply it to your own life?
Ah, that's good. I just learned of LeBron James more than an athlete campaign, and I'm like, more than a score goes along with that beautifully as well. I know what I'm going to write about. Have a great show. We'll see you in a little bit.
All right. So I think at this time, Hannah, that you and I just get to have a conversation and I get to ask you questions. So,
Great.
my first question for you is this motto, more than the score, is just absolutely fantastic. And it's one that any team or any person, including our non-athletes, anyone can use this in their lives. So, what do you personally think is at the heart of this concept that holds such a presence with this team you establish in your book?
Oh, thank you. Well, I interviewed the real life coach of the Salam School girls basketball team and several players when I was developing this story. And one of the things that the coach, Coach Cass, shared with me was this motto, more than the score. And I fictionalized almost everything. The school I created, the character, Aaliyah, sort of a combination of the different girls I spoke to. The coach herself is fictionalized, but I couldn't think of anything better than more than the score. And so I asked the coach for permission to use it in the book, and she granted it. And I'm so glad that it resonated with you because I felt like it just captured the essence of, well, the story really that I was trying to tell, which was that these girls and all athletes, I believe, were so much more than the score, so much more than being a player, more than being a team, and they were sort of forced to represent more than they were out on the court and out in life. But in general, I feel like all of us are more than the measures that we hold ourselves to, right? Whether it's the grades we get at school or how many points we put up or whatever else we use as a benchmark to evaluate ourselves, there is so much more to all of us. And what I tried to get through in the story is really it's our character, it's our integrity, it's how we conduct ourselves and move through life. Like all of those things matter so much more. And going back to sports, even things like sportsmanship and and having grace on and off the court, all of those things just mean so much more than whether you win at the end, and even your personal stats. So I think that's what Coach was getting at when she was coining the phrase, and that's really what I wanted to capture too.
Yeah, that's fantastic because especially for young people, it's so important to remind them that you're so much more than this one thing, especially a
Mhm.
win or a loss or one outcome. And I just so appreciate that your book does that. But we can't help but focus on the score a little bit in this book because it does revolve around what I think is the most beautiful sport to ever be made, basketball. I love it. I lived it. I was obsessed with it. It was a huge part of my life. And what was so great about reading this book is I immediately understood that this wasn't just a story that someone wrote about basketball. This was a story written by someone who, in some way, shape, or form, knows basketball. There were these little nuances where I'm like, oh, okay, Hannah, you got that. So, what is your relationship with the sport?
Yeah, when I was first publicizing another series that I wrote that features basketball, the Zayd Saleem Chasing the Dream series, I used to play a game with the kids I visited and would say, it was two truths and a lie. And the lie was that I wrote the book because I was a starter on my girls' high school basketball team, and that's where I got my love for the sport. And the kids inevitably knew that was a lie almost 100% of the time. And so I stopped asking it because after a while I said, "You're hurting my feelings. Do you not believe that I could do that?" And one kid finally said, "Well, maybe if you didn't say starter, we would believe it." But I actually did not play basketball other than, one-on-one in my neighborhood with my friends and playing horse, but I'm a huge fan. And it started with college basketball and then the NBA and now the WNBA. But I live with basketball fanatics. My husband is probably the most sports obsessed person I know, and college basketball is his passion. So there's a lot of basketball in my family, and it was a team effort even at home in the writing of the book. I definitely had my husband weigh in and look at the art and comment on certain things to me. I wanted to make sure that I got every detail right, and that did feel like, it was written by somebody who knew the game, because I know as a reader, if anything felt off, that could take you out of the story and make you think, that doesn't feel right. So I really, really appreciate you saying that.
Well, great. What favorite thing a coach said to me one time is fake it till you make it. So needless to say, you made it. You did a great job with it.
Thank you.
So that said, with basketball, there's the plays, there's the points, but you mentioned earlier, sportsmanship and teamwork is such a huge part of the game, of any game that we do, and just working together towards some collective goal and supporting each other throughout that process. So my question is, I've never been in the same room as you and Sophia Zaruji, but I can already tell you two are incredible teammates. I can just feel it. And I loved seeing the detail in your book from the story, especially moments that really invited us to learn more about the girls' culture, such as the design of their uniforms or the fact that they wore a hijab versus when their hair was visibly showing. Can you talk about your creative process together?
Sure. Yeah. So I too was so in awe with the way Sophia's artwork really brought the story to life. And it was my first graphic novel and hers as well. So we were both new to this process. And what was interesting for me was to see, as someone who's written other forms of books before, like picture books, where as a writer, you're encouraged not to give too many illustration notes. You're really supposed to let the artist bring themselves to the story and bring their own creative vision. In this case, I was outlining every panel and describing the action that I wanted Sophia to illustrate. And I had to think like that, in snapshots, and how to move the story forward in a series of boxes and frames. And it was amazing for me to see her bring that to life. I mean, it really was magical to see your own imaginings rendered, on the page. And I love the way she brought especially the movement, the fluidity, and the energy on the page. And definitely there was a chance for some back and forth, where I mentioned my husband weighed in as well. Like he picked up on the fact that all the players were shooting left-handed. And so he said that probably wouldn't happen in real life. And I'm a lefty, so I didn't notice that. But he made little comments, and we sent some source material, and she saw, photographs and videos and things like that. And then the design team, my editor at Random House, at Knopf, they were all amazing as well, in terms of really, especially for, two people doing this for the first time, really guiding the process through. So just the making of this book was very much a team effort, not only me and Sophia, but then the larger group as well, really pushing us to just make it, better, like coaches really, and bringing out the best in us.
Right. Something that's so neat about what you're saying is that, a good coach is in some way, shape, or form hands-on. You don't want to just leave people to their own devices 100% of the time, but a great coach puts plays in motion, gives the vision, gives the next steps, while also trusting the players to go about it in their own way. And it sounds like that's exactly what you two were doing. So no wonder it was so successful. It really is stellar what you accomplished.
Thank you.
So in basketball, you share time in the court, you share time in these practices, but you're also sharing your lives with each other. You spend an inordinate amount of time with your teammates. And one of my favorite moments from the book is when the girls win their first game, spoiler. And Coach Jess asks where the girls want to go celebrate, and they shout, Shawarma King. And it's just so great. And I want you to touch on the relationship that you see between sharing food and sharing culture, not just the perspective of those sharing the food, but also those receiving it, because we see both sides of it in your story.
Yeah, I get accused of making people hungry when they read my books, whatever form I'm writing in, because food is such a huge part of my culture. And like you mentioned, and such a wonderful question, a way of sharing my culture with others. From when I was a kid, I remember my mom encouraging me to take a special treat to a friend's house, or even to school, so that people could get a little taste of, something from our traditions. And it is just such a huge part of bringing people together and appreciating each other. So I definitely wanted to weave that into the story, and also to show progression of, of Coach Coach Jess, who's a little apprehensive at first, when it comes to the food, and then comes to appreciate it, because I think that is sort of indicative of how we may approach anything new, and unfamiliar. And food is usually, well, not usually, but many times our first foray into a new culture, and taking that first bite and deciding what we think about it. And so I wanted her to have that experience as she's really stepping into this as a non-Muslim woman, this very new environment, being at an Islamic school surrounded by Muslims and having to learn about them. And that's just one way. But I love that it's something that brings everyone together. And so it does always feature heavily. And I love shawarma.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And being able to share food with people who either haven't had access to it or don't think they have access to it is just such a special moment to have with them. And plus, you just get really great food. So win-win.
Exactly.
So you just talked about Coach Jess being a bit apprehensive, but leaning in and getting to know this culture. And that flows perfectly into the next question I have for you. A huge theme I saw in this story was asking questions, especially about someone else's culture. So, my first question about this really touches on the moment at practice in which Coach Jess pauses to provide space for any of the girls who wish to pray. And first of all, I love how you include the detail of Coach Jess saying that this is a space for, quote, anyone who wants to pray. And it's such a subtle gesture and such a subtle acknowledgement to say that every girl is an individual and every individual has their own relationship with their faith. And that said, the rest of the scene involves Coach Jess, who is this woman who's really unfamiliar with this culture, asking questions to the girls about faith and about their background. And I love that you chose to include this scene. So, talk to us about how you approached that scene from a creative stance and why you chose to intentionally share this moment with Coach and the girls. What did you want to accomplish? What did you want to showcase here?
Yeah, I think when I spoke to the real life coach and players, they really emphasized how much they learned from each other and how much it went beyond basketball, or, what went on the court or in the school building. And the coach specifically, as I said, being, fish out of water and being new to this atmosphere and new to this culture, she really did have a lot, maybe a steeper, learning curve. But the girls were also really curious to know things about her and who she was, like we all do, right? We all want to know, like, what does our teacher, is she married? Like, does she have a boyfriend? Like all of that, the personal details. And so that was my way of, allowing for that exchange, having a very natural, free-forming conversation between the girls and their coach, but also a way for the reader who might have some of the same questions. In the case of what coach is asking the girls about, do you pray at school? And, what's it like for you wearing the hijab and all of that? It was a way to answer that without it seeming artificially, informational. It's just part of the conversation, because coach was learning all that while she was on the job. And then the girls naturally had all those fun questions about her too, wanted to know her
Yeah.
as a person beyond a coach as well.
Right. And, there's so much comfort. She's not uncomfortable, but you have that little hesitation, like, how do I approach this? And you feel the comfort between them, and there's such a trust there. And
Yeah,
so,
absolutely. And respect. That's the other thing I wanted to
absolutely.
highlight, that, the coach, all of them just had just a really profound respect for each other, which I'm glad you can see, because that was really important for me to portray as well.
Mhm. And not too long after that scene, you have a moment where Coach Jess is speaking to another coach after a game. And that opposing coach begins sharing comments and just questions regarding the girls and their background. And so I have the same question for you. Why intentionally show that scene now, where another woman is asking the coach now and the coach is providing the answers?
So one of the things I was interested in was the way these girls were perceived, because the first time I learned about them was through the media. So I was reading the articles that were written about them. I was watching the video clips and the stories, and a lot of it was hinting at, a deeper discrimination, which wasn't exactly outlined, or described, but that, that was one of the obstacles they were facing as this all hijab wearing girls team going out in the world. And when I talked to the girls and asked them about that, I kept pushing them a little bit more to tell me, well, what happened and what did people say to you? And it wasn't as much as I expected. They talked about some of the, like the scene I portrayed in that, where that coach talks to our coach. They got to a school and they kind of felt like the girls were not taking them seriously and sort of laughing and expecting them not to know how to play basketball. And then the reason I put that scene in between coach and the other coach was sort of to show how coach has come along and really understands these girls and knows who they are. And then there's still this other outsider, another adult who is looking in and just sort of confused. And also confused by coach's role in this scenario. So she's sort of like, well, are you? And she hesitates, and coach asks, am I Muslim? No, I'm not, but I'm learning about these girls and I care about these girls. And you could see her being very protective of them. Even though the other person wasn't being offensive, she was just curious and wanting to understand the dynamic of, what was going on. So for me, it was really a way to have that interchange and show how coach had come along, but also, highlight some of the types of interactions that the girls really did experience in real life when it came to, being out in the world and how others were reacting to them.
Yeah. This notion of asking questions in the book and everything you just talked about how do you do it and the things these girls on the real team that inspired this book, how they were asked some interesting things and some tough things. And in your book, this concept of asking questions, it starts to get more significant and a bit more pressing later in the story, particularly when more news networks and media sources start highlighting this team for a story that ultimately becomes an international or a national story. So in journalism, I really feel that the questions you ask your subjects speak louder than anything else you can say or do. And can you speak to the decisions you made when crafting the line of questions the girls received from journalists? And I'm especially curious to hear your comments regarding how journalists can miss the mark sometimes, especially when your subjects are breaking some norm, some understood norm in some way, and the impact that has on who they're interviewing as well as the audience receiving this interview, which I know is like 19 questions in a row. Let me
I'll
know if
try
you
to
need
get to
anything
all of them.
repeated. Yeah.
Yeah, well, for me, what I found fascinating and I thought, what can I bring to this story, right? If you read the actual story of the slum schoolgirls team and their season and watch the videos, it's all very inspiring and of course it inspired my story. So I felt like this is something I want to tell, but I wanted to bring something else to it. And that was where when I interviewed the girls, I kept asking them, what else do you wish they had asked you? Or was there anything that made you uncomfortable? Or even what I said earlier, like, what were the discriminating things that you experienced and all of that. And one thing that they kept telling me was that it wasn't, it was those type of awkward leading questions the journalists were asking, where, I don't think they would ask other teams these types of questions like, how do your parents feel about you playing sports? And do they support you? Like, you can't imagine a Midwestern regular, boys basketball team being asked that. But because a lot of these players came from families that were immigrants, and the fact that they were all wearing the hijab, it was a lot of questions around that, and even things like, their thoughts on politics and immigration and their relationship to their home countries and things so far outside the scope of basketball. And it just showed that these girls, even though they were being celebrated for their turnaround sports season, which is a story in and of itself. The part that they were really latching on to was the fact that they were hijab wearing and really otherizing them in a way, which they were pushing back against. And they really wanted to just be seen as basketball players. And I think they were still, proud of their identity and who they were, but that wasn't the only thing to be highlighted. And so that was why I wanted to showcase their discomfort with that, because I think sometimes as the people receiving, these stories, we don't always wonder what the angle is or why the angle is that, or why someone is choosing to highlight what they are in a story. But like you said, it does impact our perception. And if somebody is talking about something as if it is novel or strange or unusual, then maybe you'll start to think so too. Which is why I thought it was lovely that the girls all kept saying that they really wanted to be seen as athletes first, and their identity second.
I appreciate you mentioning the concept of othering. And just a way we can meet othering is with familiarity
Mhm.
and just seeing it, whatever it may be. And that said, I really loved your inclusion of Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and Hakeem Olajuwon. They're just fantastic athletes, fantastic people. And you mentioned in the book they quote changed perceptions of Islam with positive media coverage. I would love to hear your thoughts on visibility and representation in sports, particularly the sports that do tend to get covered by the media. And as a follow-up, do you think there are any athletes currently accomplishing this, whether for basketball or for another sport?
Yeah, so I mean, I remember as a kid hearing about Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, hearing about Muhammad Ali, and just the way that would just galvanize, the community of Muslims and make them feel such a sense of pride, especially when we had so few public figures in the US that you could look to or turn to, whether it was politics or in the media or acting, anything at that time. It's, slowly opened up a bit, but I think it's still so important for everyone to have role models and to have people that they can see and say that person's similar to me in whatever way. And I think it's lovely to see athletes who are unapologetic about who they are and are proud of their faith, and they're putting that out there as something just like these girls in this book, like they're putting out who they are in every way for the world to see, and to push back against that othering that you're mentioning, and to allow for things like Ramadan and fasting. For example, we see like modern day examples of Mo Salah, who plays for Liverpool, an Egyptian soccer player, or Jaylen Brown for the Celtics, who was fasting during Ramadan, and that was mentioned during the playoffs that he had to break his fast or whatever it was, and all of those things just help kids, of course, not only see themselves and get excited, kids and adults, let's be real, but also, and have that sense of pride and connection to whoever the person is, but also in a larger sense to allow people to have these moments of understanding. And, it is representation because they are saying, this is who I am, this is what my faith means to me, and it's part of me. And if you appreciate me as a player, then, appreciate me as a person more than the score, because this is part of my life. And I love seeing, especially in the soccer world, we see a lot, but also basketball. Lamine Yamal, the young soccer phenomenon, is now the Barca player. He's also, he's so young, but he too has been, very vocal about who he is, and his identity. So it is encouraging to see more and more of these players out there taking the responsibility seriously.
Absolutely. I just remember when the WNBA was first announced, I was 10 years old. I was in fifth grade. And I remember thinking, holy smokes, a woman can be a professional basketball player. And
Absolutely.
that just launched the life of myself and so many women that I know. And you see all of these names one after another who just continue to change the game. And now hearing about these phenomenal players, I
Yeah.
had boys playing basketball at our high school, and some kid shot like practically half court shot, and someone yelled out, Caitlin. And I'm like,
Oh, wow.
oh, how cool. We're
Yeah,
in North Country, New York, and these boys, these tough, tough boys, are shouting out Caitlin Clark. Like, what a cool world this is. It's just neat.
absolutely.
So, speaking of some great players, I want to focus on two of your characters, Aaliyah and Nora, the captains. I'd love you to speak about the conflict that was brewing early in this book and then the moment it seemed to ease, because there was a sense of camaraderie that clearly started to get established between them when the girls are sharing their mutual alarm about the questions they're being asked by the press. So, what about that moment do you think shifts this dynamic between these two girls?
Yes, I think Nora is maybe a little petty in the beginning. I think a little bit annoyed as an upperclassman that she has to share this captain, role with Aaliyah, who's a freshman. And so she's not very welcoming and including of Aaliyah, even, something like simple as, deciding to wear school, like their team uniforms to school. And she sort of makes that decision without her, even though it's Aaliyah's suggestion. So she's not being very generous. But I think the changing moment is when the two of them really start to see what's happening as team captains. They're the ones who are being interviewed by the media, and they both get the sense that, wait a second, something feels a little weird. Are these questions odd, or is it just me? And when they both connect on that moment and realize that it's bigger than each of them, that maybe it's something that they need to address. And the first time we sort of see them align is in the locker room where they're telling the other girls, this is happening, but let's decide to handle it this way. And that's really like the moment where they become, less about who they are individually and definitely gelling as a team. And in the case of the two of them, really becoming the leaders that they should be, and they're both allowing them. And maybe it's Noura more than Aaliyah. Noura's giving Aaliyah the space to, share that role with her, in a way that she, needed a little time to let happen. And I think that the reason I chose to include it is that it just is a very human reaction. We see those things in teams where there is some competition and sometimes petty jealousies and rivalries that happen. And I didn't want it to be so overwhelming or so mean girl, but like a hint of it, because I do think it's something that players do experience. And of course higher uh higher grade players might pull rank, and stuff, that kind of thing. I think we see all the time.
Right.
So, and I think also I had played on a varsity field hockey team when I was a freshman, and I remember feeling very much like I was, without any authority. I wasn't co-captain, but I remember feeling like I had to prove myself too. So wanted to throw that in there too.
Yeah, and I do love that you did include this really universal experience. And this isn't the only experience you put in there that I thought really does, you know, allow your readers and the characters to really form this connection of seeing one another, because you have these mental obstacles that athletes, especially young athletes, but just young people in general, and even adults, we often face these things. We have self-doubt. We focus on mistakes. We focus on our losses or the difficult social dynamics amongst your quote unquote team members, whether it's your friends or your teammates, your colleagues, or your community members. And somehow a few incidents outweigh everything else. Anything good just goes away and our brain focuses on that. And those are universal experiences, regardless of age, background, the size of your school, your town, who you believe in, what you believe in. Everyone's gone through this. So that said, I appreciate how the conflicts that you introduce have the ability to unify so many of us. Do you see your book as a possible resource for young people who struggle with any number of these challenges? And if yes, how so?
I hope so. I mean, that was really why I made Aaliyah deal with all the things she has to deal with. It always, to me, the goal in all of the books I write is for kids to be able to relate to my characters in some way, and to be able to see them, some part of themselves in the stories, no matter where that comes from. And when I was creating Aaliyah as a character and talking with all the girls I interviewed and the coach, I picked from what they shared with me and the different challenges they were overcoming in their lives. And I felt sorry for her because she was dealing with so many at once. But I think it was, it's believable. We do have many different pressures in life. And so she not only is moving to a new city after the school year has begun and starting at a new school, needing to make friends, looking to the team to help her form that friendship that she wants, but also, which it does, but also then creates this rivalry with Noura. And then just the pressures that many student athletes face, being, you know, pressured to do well academically, or putting that pressure on yourself while, trying to go to practice and show up at games and all of that. It's a lot, plus team bonding activities outside of school. Like being on a team can take a lot of time. Um, and then on top of that, one of the things the coach mentioned to me was a player that she had who was very focused on her mistakes. And as someone who could very much relate to that, I think many of us tend to do that, right? We don't see everything that we do well, but we focus on all of our missteps and, fumbles. And so that's where she said she actually took the player aside and did show her stats. And I love that as a coach, like that was brilliant on her part to not only pick up on that that tendency of the player to beat herself up, but also to realize that she needed to see, the good that she was doing too and how that might help her. So, I mean, the coach was phenomenal, but I was thinking that could be a universal message for all of us who are sometimes hard on ourselves. And hopefully some of those other experiences of, adapting to a new surroundings or making new friends or all of those types of things are things that readers can see themselves in and hopefully feel connected to and be able to relate and identify. And that's what we hope in all the writing we do really is to help readers connect.
I
Right.
was just I
Well,
was thinking while you all were talking just now too, like because we have to come in because we have to end the show, and I was like, I could listen to this for the next 35 minutes, and then I have more things that I want to talk to you about afterwards. But I was thinking about the connection of coaching kids on a court and coaching kids to be writers, and how they do get stuck, and they dwell on their mistakes so much, and they get paralyzed and they get frozen, and like it's our jobs as writing professionals and as teachers is to figure out a way to unstick them. And early on, you were talking about, you were telling the illustrator you were trying to do discussion of snapshots, that you had these snapshots in your head. And I was thinking about how beautiful snapshot writing activities could be for kids trying to get like, especially around othering, which you all talked about, like the idea of what is a snapshot of a time that you were othered, or the way adults other you as a teenager, or you have othered other kids in this school. What does that look like? How do you illustrate that? What are the thought bubbles? It's just a really cool writing opportunity. I was like thinking, man, you can even put a hint of Mean Girl, which is going to be my new quote right now. A hint of Mean Girl. I thought it was great, awesome. Thank you so much for this great conversation. It's going to be so enlightening for so many listeners. Rhiannon, I believe you have a writing prompt for people who want to stop and have their kids think a little bit.
I do. I do. So, so much in sports and in life, we focus on winning, but that makes us ask ourselves, what does it mean to win? What does winning look like? The Peace Academy basketball team does not win at the end in the traditional sense, but they definitely still won in a number of ways. So, my question is, in what ways do the girls win throughout the book and even at the end of the book? And once you're done chewing on that for a bit, think about what ways that you have experienced a personal win in your life, whether recently or in the past. And I'm going to challenge you. I want you to try to avoid traditional examples like, oh, I won our basketball game, or I won our soccer match, anything where someone else has to quote unquote lose because of a score. Instead, think more than the score. Think about how you've had other kinds of wins.
Great question. Here's the book again.
Great question, Rhiannon. I also want to say, Hannah and Rhiannon, thank you. I could have listened to that conversation for another hour. It was amazing. And such good questions about writing and intention and purpose. I think it'd be really helpful to teachers and young writers thinking about how books like this are made. So thank you so much for that. I also always want to say thank you to Brian. It's a great pleasure to be able to listen to these conversations in the back room with you, texting about how great they are. And I want to thank our listeners. Thanks for being here. Don't ever miss an episode of The Right Time because amazing teachers talk to amazing writers and it's fantastic. So you can sign up for our newsletter. You can join our teaching community at the studio at nwp.org and look for our podcasts wherever you find them.
You're
Thanks,
listening to
everybody, and
NWP
have a great
Radio,
night.
a production of the National Writing Project.
NWP. NWP Radio.